The hospital corridor was cold and sterile. David Carter stood frozen in the doorway, his calloused hands trembling at his sides. Through the glass window, he could see the small figure lying in the bed. Tubes, monitors, the steady beep of machines keeping a child alive. He shouldn't be here. He had no right to be here. But his feet wouldn't move. His eyes locked on the child's pale face, the way the small chest rose and fell with effort. "Sir, I need you to step back," a nurse said gently, touching his arm. David barely heard her. His gaze traveled down to the child's exposed wrist, where an IV was taped carefully to delicate skin. And there it was. A birthmark. Small, star-shaped, unmistakable. David's knees buckled. His hand shot out to grip the doorframe. "No," he whispered, the word barely audible. "It can't be." The nurse stepped closer, concerned. "Sir, are you all right?" But David wasn't all right, because 5 years ago, his son had disappeared, vanished without a trace from a playground while David had looked away for just 30 seconds. And his son had that exact same birthmark, on that exact same wrist. What David didn't know was that the woman who adopted this child, the powerful CEO who had publicly humiliated him just days ago, was standing in the room behind him. And she was about to realize that the nobody who sold his house to save her child wasn't a nobody at all. He was the ghost from her past she'd been running from for 5 years. The construction site was loud. Hammers pounding, saws cutting, men shouting over machinery. David Carter wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm, leaving a streak of dust across his face. 35 years old, broad shoulders from years of manual labor, dark hair perpetually covered in construction dust. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Tired, haunted. The eyes of a man who'd lost something irreplaceable. "Carter, lunch break!" his foreman called. David nodded, setting down his tools. He walked to the edge of the site, pulling out his phone. One new message. David smiled faintly. His daughter, 7 years old, brown curls that bounced when she ran, a gap-toothed grin that could light up the darkest days. She was all he had left. He typed back quickly, "I'll be there." As he unwrapped his sandwich, cheap bread and cheaper lunch meat, he heard the other workers talking nearby. "Did you see that CEO on the news? Isabella Grant built her company from nothing, they say." "From nothing?" another worker scoffed. "More like from daddy's money and stepping on people like us." David wasn't listening. He was looking at the photo on his phone's lock screen. 2 children. Mia on the left, age 2, and on the right, a boy, 3 years old. Blonde hair, blue eyes, that star-shaped birthmark visible on his tiny wrist. Ethan, his son. Gone for 5 years. The police had stopped searching after 2 years. Cold case, they called it. David called it the end of his marriage. His wife, Sarah, couldn't handle the guilt, the what-ifs, the endless nights wondering if their son was alive somewhere, calling for parents who couldn't find him. She'd left 3 years ago. Divorce papers, a note. "I can't look at you without seeing him. I'm sorry." Now it was just David and Mia. A small apartment that cost too much, a job that paid too little, and a promise he'd made to himself every single day for 5 years. "I will find you, Ethan. I will bring you home." But hope was a fragile thing, and even after 5 years, David's hope was starting to crack. He finished his sandwich in silence, staring at a photo of a boy who'd be 8 years old now, if he was still alive. The conference room was all glass and steel. Isabella Grant sat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her designer suit immaculate. 38 years old, sharp features, eyes that could cut through excuses like a knife. She was reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant knocked. "Mrs. Grant, there's a situation with the charity gala. The venue—" "I don't pay you to bring me problems," Isabella interrupted, not looking up. "I pay you to bring me solutions." The assistant hesitated. "The venue manager says we need to confirm the donation amount by tomorrow, or—" "Then confirm it." "It's $500,000, ma'am." Isabella finally looked up, her expression unchanged. "And?" That's more than we budgeted for the entire event." Isabella closed her laptop with a soft click. "Write the check. The Grant Foundation doesn't do things halfway." As the assistant scurried away, Isabella turned her chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere down there, people were struggling, working paycheck to paycheck, worrying about rent, about food, about their children's futures. She'd left that world behind 20 years ago. She'd built her empire through ruthlessness, through never accepting no, through stepping on anyone who stood between her and success. And she'd never looked back. Her phone buzzed, a text from her son's nanny. "Evan has a fever. Should I take him to the doctor?" Isabella frowned. Evan, her 5-year-old son, the child she'd adopted 3 years ago through a private agency. A child with no past, no family, no connections. Perfect. She typed back, "If it's over 100 degrees, otherwise give him medicine and put him to bed." She set the phone down and returned to her reports. Children got sick. It was normal. The nanny would handle it. That's what she paid her for. It was Saturday morning when David's world collided with Isabella Grant's. David was at the hardware store with Mia, her small hand tucked into his as they browsed the paint section. The landlord had finally agreed to let him repaint the apartment if he did it himself. "Daddy, can we get the blue one?" Mia asked, pointing at a can of sky blue paint. David checked the price tag. $28. He had $32 in his wallet. "Maybe next time, sweetheart. We need the white one. It's cheaper." Mia's face fell, but she nodded. She was used to next time. As David loaded the paint can into his cart, he heard a commotion near the entrance. A woman's voice, sharp and demanding. "This is unacceptable. I've been waiting for 10 minutes." David glanced over. A woman in expensive athleisure wear, dark sunglasses pushed up into her hair. Designer bag, perfectly manicured nails, tapping impatiently on the counter. The store clerk, a teenager who looked terrified, stammered, "I'm sorry, ma'am, the manager is on lunch break and I can't authorize a return without—" "I don't care about your policies. Do you know who I am?" David felt Mia tug his hand. "Daddy, why is that lady so mean?" "Some people forget how to be kind," David whispered. But he couldn't look away. The woman was berating the clerk, demanding to speak to corporate, threatening to have someone fired. Other customers were watching now, uncomfortable, but no one said anything. David should have kept walking, should have stayed out of it. But he thought about that kid, probably making minimum wage, probably scared of losing his job, probably just trying to get through his shift. David stepped forward. "Excuse me." The woman turned, her eyes cold behind designer frames. "And you are?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "Someone who knows what it's like to work retail." "Let me guess. Construction worker? Handyman?" She paused. "Minimum wage?" David felt Mia squeeze his hand tighter. "I work construction, yes." "Then perhaps you should focus on your own life instead of interfering in mine." Isabella turned back to the clerk. "I want your manager's name, now." David opened his mouth to respond, but Mia tugged his hand hard. "Daddy, please, let's just go." He looked down at his daughter. Her eyes were wide, worried. She'd seen enough conflict in her short life. David nodded. "You're right, sweetheart." As they walked away, Isabella called after them. "That's what I thought." David didn't turn around, but his hands were shaking. Not from anger, but from humiliation. Because Mia had witnessed it, had seen a stranger look at his father like he was worthless. At the register, as David paid for his paint, the young clerk whispered, "Thank you for trying to help." David forced a smile. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm used to it." The kid glanced toward the entrance, where Isabella was still arguing. "Rich people think they can treat us like garbage." David squeezed Mia's hand and left the store. He never wanted to see that woman again. But fate, it seemed, had other plans.
Monday morning arrived with rain. David dropped Mia off at school, kissing her forehead before she ran inside. Then he drove to the construction site, his mind already on the day's work. But when he arrived, the crew was gathered around someone's phone. "Did you see this?" one of the workers said. "See what?" David asked. "That CEO lady, Isabella Grant. Her kid is sick, like really sick." David's stomach tightened. What happened? Another worker pulled up a news article on his phone. The headline read, "CEO Isabella Grant's son in critical condition. Rare heart defect requires emergency surgery." David scanned the article. The child, Evan Grant, age 5, adopted 3 years ago. Diagnosed with a congenital heart defect. Surgery needed within 2 weeks. Cost, $380,000. Insurance covering only a fraction. There was a photo. Isabella Grant, standing outside a hospital, her face, for once, showing something other than cold confidence. She looked terrified. "Karma," one of the workers muttered. "She treats people like trash, and now she's learning what it feels like to be helpless." But David wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on the photo, not of Isabella, of the small figure in the hospital window behind her. A child. Blonde hair. Small frame. And though the photo was grainy, David's breath caught in his throat. Because something about that child looked familiar. He zoomed in on the photo, his hands trembling. The angle was wrong, the resolution too low. But, "You okay, Carter?" someone asked. David shoved the phone back. Yeah, fine. But he wasn't fine. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. That photo burned into his mind. It couldn't be. Could it? Ethan would be 8 now. The child in the photo was 5, 3 years too young. Unless the adoption records were wrong. Unless someone had lied about the age. David sat up, his heart pounding. He grabbed his phone and searched Isabella Grant, adopted son. Article after article appeared, but none had detailed information. The adoption was private, sealed records. Then he found it. A small piece from a charity blog 3 years ago. CEO Isabella Grant opens her heart, adopts child from closed adoption agency. The article mentioned the agency name, New Beginnings Adoption Services. David's blood ran cold. That agency had shut down 4 years ago, raided by the FBI for involvement in illegal adoptions. Some of the children had been kidnapped. David's hands shook so hard he dropped the phone. He picked it up, his mind racing. He needed to see the child, needed to know. But how? He couldn't just walk into a hospital and demand to see Isabella Grant's son. He had no proof, no rights, no money for lawyers. He had nothing. Except David's eyes fell on the stack of mail on his nightstand. a letter from his mortgage company.
He'd been behind on payments for months. The small house he'd bought when Ethan was born, the house he'd promised Sarah they'd raise their family in, it was all he had left. And suddenly, David knew what he had to do. Tuesday morning, David called a realtor. "I need to sell my house, fast." The realtor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, met him that afternoon. She walked through the small two-bedroom home, noting the peeling paint, the dated fixtures, the crack in the kitchen tile. "Mr. Carter, to be honest, in this condition, you're looking at maybe $95,000, and that's if we find a buyer quickly." David nodded. "How fast can you sell it?" "If you're willing to take a lowball offer, a week, maybe less." "Do it." The realtor hesitated. "Sir, can I ask why the rush? If you're in financial trouble, there are programs." "I need the money for something important." She didn't push further. That night, David sat Mia down at their small kitchen table. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about something." Mia looked up from her coloring book. "Are we in trouble, Daddy?" David's heart broke. 7 years old, and she already knew to ask that question. "No, baby, but we're going to move to an apartment." "Why?" How could he explain? How could he tell his 7-year-old daughter that he was selling their home to save a child who might be her brother? Because sometimes we have to give up something good to help someone who needs it more. Mia was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Is it because of Ethan?" David's breath caught. "What?" "You think that sick boy on TV might be Ethan, don't you?" David stared at his daughter. "How did she—" "I saw you looking at the picture," Mia whispered. "And you had the same face you have when you look at Ethan's photos." David pulled Mia into his arms. His eyes burning with tears he refused to let fall. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I have to find out." Mia hugged him tighter. "Then we should help him, even if it's not Ethan, because that's what Ethan would want us to do." David held his daughter, wondering how someone so small could be so wise.
The house sold in 4 days. $89,000. Below asking. But David took it. He opened a cashier's check for the full amount and walked into the hospital where Evan Grant was being treated. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to make a donation," David said, "for Evan Grant's surgery." The receptionist's eyes widened. "Oh, let me get the financial coordinator." 10 minutes later, David was sitting in a small office across from a woman who looked like she'd seen everything. "Mr. Carter, this is incredibly generous, but I have to ask, do you know the Grant family personally?" "No." "Then why—" "Does it matter?" The coordinator hesitated. "I just want to make sure you understand. This is $89,000. That's a life-changing amount of money." "I know." She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, I'll process this immediately. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning." "I'd like to see him," David said suddenly. "The child?" "Yes." "Sir, that's not really— I just sold my house to save his life. I think I've earned the right to see him." The coordinator was quiet. Then she sighed. "Wait here." 20 minutes later, David was being led down a corridor by a nurse. "Mrs. Grant is in a meeting with the surgeons, but you can see Evan through the window, just for a moment." They stopped outside a room. Through the glass, David could see the small figure in the bed. Blonde hair, pale skin, an oxygen mask over his small face. David's legs nearly gave out. The nurse touched his arm. "Sir?" But David couldn't speak, because as he watched, the child's arm shifted and the hospital gown sleeve fell back, revealing his wrist and the birthmark. Small, star-shaped, unmistakable. The same birthmark David had kissed 1,000 times. The same birthmark that haunted his dreams. The nurse was saying something, but David couldn't hear over the roaring in his ears. It was him. After 5 years, 5 years of searching, of hoping, of praying, his son was alive. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back." David's hand pressed against the glass. "That's my son," he whispered. "What?" "That's my son." Louder now. "His name is Ethan. Ethan Carter. He was taken from a playground 5 years ago. He has a birthmark on his right wrist in the shape of a star." For just a moment, Isabella's mask cracked. Her eyes flicked to the window, to the child in the bed, to the wrist with the birthmark. "Security, now!" she screamed. But David saw it, the flash of doubt, the moment of fear. She knew. She'd always known.
David was removed from the hospital by security. But he didn't leave. He sat in his truck in the parking lot, his hands gripping the steering wheel. His son was in there, alive, after 5 years. But he had no proof, no rights. The police would think he was crazy, a desperate father seeing what he wanted to see. He pulled out his phone and called the detective who'd worked Ethan's case. "Carter," Detective Hayes said, surprise in his voice. "It's been a while. I found him." Silence. "I found Ethan. He's at St. Michael's Hospital. He's been adopted by Isabella Grant, the CEO. David, we've been through this. The Grant adoption was legitimate. I checked it myself 2 years ago when you called about it. Did you see the child?" "No, but he has the birthmark, Hayes. The star-shaped birthmark on his right wrist. How many children have that exact birthmark in that exact spot?" More silence. "I'll make some calls," Hayes finally said. "But David, don't get your hopes up. If she adopted through a legitimate agency, the agency was shut down for trafficking kidnapped children." Hayes swore under his breath. "Give me 24 hours. David hung up. 24 hours. Ethan's surgery was in 12. He got out of his truck and walked back into the hospital. Different entrance this time. He bought a coffee at the lobby cafe and sat in a chair with a view of the elevators. He waited.
At 11 p.m., Isabella Grant stepped out of an elevator, alone. No security, no assistance. She looked exhausted. David stood. "Mrs. Grant?" She stopped. Her hand moved toward her phone. "I'm not here to cause trouble," David said quickly. "I just want to talk. 5 minutes." "I have nothing to say to you." "Then listen." David took a step closer. 5 years ago, my son disappeared from a playground. He was 3 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, a birthmark on his right wrist shaped like a star. His voice broke. "And 3 years ago, you adopted a child. Same age, same features. through an agency that was shut down for trafficking kidnapped children. Isabella's face was stone. My son was not kidnapped. I have documentation. Then let me see it. Let me see the birth certificate, the adoption papers. Prove me wrong. I don't owe you anything. You owe him the truth. David's voice was raw. If I'm wrong, I'll walk away. I'll never bother you again. But if I'm right, then that child in there has a father who never stopped looking for him, a sister who still sleeps with his old stuffed bear, a family who loves him. Isabella's eyes were cold. He has a family. Me. Do you love him? David asked quietly. That's none of your business. Did you read him bedtime stories? Do you know his favorite color? Do you tuck him in at night and tell him he's safe? I provide everything he needs, except the truth. She turned to walk away. I sold my house to pay for his surgery, David said. She stopped. The $89,000 donation? That was me. I sold the only home my daughter has ever known to save him, because even if he's not my son, even if I'm wrong, he's still a child who deserves to live. Isabella slowly turned around. For the first time, her mask was gone, and underneath, David saw something he didn't expect. Guilt. You sold your house? She whispered. Yes. Why? Because someone had to. They stood in silence. Then Isabella said, The agency told me his parents were dead, that there was no family, no one looking for him. They lied. I didn't know. But you suspected, didn't you? The birthmark, the age, the timing. You suspected, and you didn't ask questions because you wanted a child and you didn't care where he came from. Isabella's hands were shaking. I gave him a good life, everything he could want. Except his real name. Except the truth. He doesn't remember you, Isabella said, and there were tears in her eyes now. He calls me Mom. He's happy. If you take him away. I'm not trying to take him away from you. I'm trying to give him back his identity, his history, his sister. Isabella sank into a chair, her perfect composure shattered. What do you want from me? She whispered. A DNA test.
The surgery was successful. Evan Grant, legally, Ethan Carter, truthfully, came out of surgery with a repaired heart and a future ahead of him. The DNA test took 3 days to process. Detective Hayes called David with the results. It's a match. 99.9%. That's your son. David had to sit down. After 5 years of searching, he'd found him. But the legal battle was just beginning. Isabella had hired lawyers. The case would take months, maybe years. And through it all, Ethan was in the hospital, recovering, unaware that his entire world was about to change. David visited every day, sat outside the room when Isabella was there, sat in a chair by the window when she wasn't. He didn't speak to Ethan, didn't want to confuse him, not yet. But he was there. 1 week after the surgery, David arrived to find Isabella sitting in the hallway outside Ethan's room. She looked up as he approached. Can we talk? They walked to the hospital chapel, empty, quiet. Isabella spoke first. I spoke to my lawyers. They say I have a strong case for adoption rights, that even if he's biologically yours, I've been his legal parent for 3 years. David said nothing. But, Isabella continued, her voice shaking, I've also been thinking about what you said, about love, about family, about truth. She pulled out a folder. These are the adoption records, everything the agency gave me. I want you to see them. David took the folder. Inside were documents: birth certificate, blank where the parents' names should be, medical records, incomplete, and a note, handwritten. Child found abandoned, no identification, estimated age 2 years. They told me he was abandoned, Isabella whispered, that no one wanted him. Someone stole him, David said, his voice hard. And someone else sold him. Isabella was crying now. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. David looked at her, this woman who'd humiliated him in a hardware store, who'd built an empire by stepping on people like him. And he saw something he hadn't expected. A mother, terrified of losing her child. He needs both of us, David said quietly. Isabella looked up, shocked. He needs me because I'm his biological father, because I can tell him where he came from, because Mia deserves to know her brother. He paused. But he also needs you, because you're the one who held him when he was scared, who made him feel safe, who chose him when you didn't have to. What are you saying? Isabella whispered. I'm saying we co-parent, split custody. I won't take him from you, but I won't walk away either. Isabella stared at him. You would do that after everything You saved his life by adopting him. Even if it started wrong, you gave him a home, food, safety. That matters. I don't deserve this kindness. Maybe not. But Ethan deserves a chance to know both of us.
3 months later, the custody agreement was finalized. Ethan would spend weekdays with Isabella, weekends with David. Both parents would be honest with him about his past, slowly, gently, as he was ready to hear it. The first weekend, David picked Ethan up from Isabella's house. Ethan climbed into the car, shy and uncertain. He didn't remember David, didn't remember his old life. But he smiled when David said, "There's someone who's been waiting a very long time to meet you." They drove to David's new apartment, small, 2 bedrooms, nothing like the house he'd sold. But Mia was waiting on the front step. When Ethan got out of the car, Mia walked up to him slowly. "Hi," she said. "I'm Mia. I'm your sister." Ethan looked at David. "I have a sister?" "You do," David said, his voice thick. Mia held out her hand. "Do you want to see your room? Daddy and I set it up. We weren't sure what you liked, but we tried." Ethan took her hand, and David watched his 2 children walk into the apartment together. After 5 years of searching, 5 years of pain, his family was finally coming home. Isabella watched from her car across the street. She didn't get out, didn't interrupt, but she smiled through her tears, because for the first time in her life, she'd done something right. She'd chosen love over pride. She'd chosen the child's happiness over her own fear. And maybe, just maybe, that made her something more than a CEO. It made her a mother.
The story could have ended differently. David could have fought for sole custody. Isabella could have used her money and power to win, but they didn't, because they realized something that too many adults forget. Children don't belong to us. We belong to them. Our job isn't to own them or control them or shape them into what we want. Our job is to love them, to protect them, to give them roots and wings. David sold his house not because he knew Ethan was his son. He sold it because a child needed help, and he was able to give it. That's the kind of person the world needs more of. Not heroes who only help their own, but heroes who help because it's right. And sometimes The universe has a way of rewarding that kind of love, not with money, not with fame, but with something far more valuable: truth, justice, and family reunited.